On this episode of the Gig Harbor Fly Show, we're going to talk all about trout spey. For those of you unfamiliar with trout spey is fishing for trout in rivers with two-handed rods, just like you would for steelhead. The retrieve of the fly is a little bit different, but by and large, the mechanics and pretty much the feel of it is the same. Except that you catch more fish. First, we'll talk about the different trout spey lines, and then we'll jump into some other gear such as rods and reels. So for lines, in the trout spey world, it's just like in steelhead land as well as with single hand fly lines. You have lines that are designed for line speed and delicate presentations, as well as lines that are designed to turn over mass, to turn over sink tips and big flies in bulk. And so if you're familiar with single hand lines, a great example to talk about the difference between Scandi style trout spey lines and Skagit style trout spey lines is that the Scandi lines have a longer taper to them, and I like to compare them to maybe something like a Rio Gold, something that you would throw for dry flies, smaller bugs. But if you have to throw a huge streamer, it's not going to really do the job. The Skagit world is more like the Rio outbound short. And for all of you that fish Puget Sound beaches, you're very familiar with that line. It's got a short, compact head on the front of the line that has a lot of mass to it. So big flies, or if you're fishing streams and need to chuck a sink tip, I mean, it throws all that stuff, whether it's a cone head fly or has dumbbell eyes on it or stuff like that. So in the spey world, the Scandi lines are designed for throwing smaller flies, and in trout spey, they're great for throwing soft hackles, smaller streamers, whereas the Skagit style lines are really short, compact, and designed to throw bigger sink tips and bigger flies. Here I have a Sage Pulse 11-foot 3-weight, and this is one of my favorite rods for trout spey. It fishes really well, casts really well with both the Rio Trout Spey line, which is more of a Scandi style line to it, and also casts great with a Skagit style line like the Rio Skagit Trout Spey. A couple other rods that I have recently fished that I really enjoyed was the Redington Hydrogen. The 11.5 4-weight is a little bit heavy for trout spey stuff. You can hook some big trout on it. I think it'd be a great rod maybe up in Alaska. I would love to try out the 3-weight in that series. It's really lightweight. I know there's some beach anglers using the 11.5-foot 4-weight locally, but the other Redington rod that I really liked was the Redington Dually. And the Redington Dually comes in some really great configurations. There's a 2-weight and a 3-weight, which are perfect for trout fishing. And now when we talk about 2-weight, 3-weight, 4-weight in trout spey, it's not the equivalent of a 2-weight in a single hand rod. It's just like how with larger spey rods, a 7-weight spey rod or an 8-weight spey rod fights more like a single hander that's 1 or 2 rod lines heavy. So a 2-weight or 3-weight trout spey can handle fish that are 3, 4, maybe even 5 pounds. So, I mean, it definitely can handle the big fish that are going to be eating a streamer. The thing I like about the Redington Dually is that it comes in at a price of $250. And so for those of you that are just exploring trout spey stuff, want a rod that actually casts decent, it's a great rod to start with. When it comes to reels, trout spey is just like regular 2-hand spey rods. The reel size has to be bumped up. One, you need a little bit more weight to balance out the longer length of rod. Usually the rods are 10.5, 11, maybe 12 feet long. 12 feet for trout spey is probably the longest you'll see, but a 10.5 or an 11-foot rod is very common. But you also have the capacity of line needed with a larger reel. The lines that we have on these trout spey rods are designed to flex the rod a little bit more deeply, and they would be the equivalent of a single hand line that might be 2 or sometimes even 3 line weights heavier. And so on a 2-weight or 3-weight trout spey rod, you might put a 5.6 reel, or maybe even a 6.7 reel. So reels that are a little bit heavier and have a little bit more capacity are great setups with the longer rods. There's a lot of reel options that will work with Trout Spey, and if you have a 6-weight or 7-weight line reel, that's probably going to be a great thing to pair up on a Trout Spey rod. If you're looking for a new reel, some of the reels that I really like, the new Redington Grande 5.6 matches up really well on a 2 or 3-weight Trout Spey. But this is a Sage Spectrum Max 5.6, and it matches up great as well. And a lot of options out there because that size of reel is really common in that 5.6 territory. So one of the big differences between Trout Spey and, say, steelhead swinging for flies, I would say, is really the mend. Some of it is identical, the way we fish it with the traditional wet fly swing. But usually when we're throwing streamers, with Trout Spey, we'll put a downstream mend in the line and jig the line a little bit to give the fly a little bit more action. And usually that hang down, as that fly hangs right below you along the bank, you get a lot of fish with that. This last fall we were out on the Missouri River for 2 trips back to back, and so it was a great opportunity fishing several days in a row to try out different Trout Spey setups. And by far the Sage Pulse was my favorite, but the Redington Dually was, for the price, it's pretty hard to beat. If you're interested in getting into Trout Spey, we have spey casting lessons available, and we'd be happy to teach you the fundamentals of casting. We also have a lot of rods and reels and lines to choose from to get you outfitted. But we also have a try before you buy program where you can rent a rod and reel setup. It comes all set up with lines, sink tips, etc. And you can take it and go fishing. And then if you decide to buy a rod and reel combo, we credit that rental amount back to you. And so even right now, head out to the Yakima River for a day, maybe 2 days, and go try out one of these rods and see what you think. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Gig Harbor Fly Show.